how you can complete a fix and flip for less than $5,000. I talk to a lot of people who don't want to start fix and flips because they don't think they have the money. They think it's a rich man's game and that you either need a ton of cash, a rich uncle, or win the lottery to get started. Well, you don't have to be out of luck. That could not be further from the truth. So let me show you how you can get a deal done all the time for under $5,000. Okay guys, there's multiple ways of making deals happen with little to no money, and I wanna talk about those in detail that can work for you on the deals you're looking to do. Now, it depends on, there's a couple of strategies or ways to do this. Let's jump over to the whiteboard here. So there's a couple of ways you can make deals happen with little to no money. One thing that a lot of people don't think about is wholesaling, okay? Wholesaling is basically where you go and get a property under contract. Let's say you're gonna buy this property for $100,000 and this is your buyer A. Or we can call it, and this is seller. So you get it under contract for $100,000 and then you're gonna give that to buyer B, someone you're gonna sell it to, for $110,000, okay? Now what happens is this guy pays you $10,000 and then he takes over and buys it from the seller for $100,000. You walk away with $10,000. The only thing you had to come up with in a transition like this is you had to come up with earnest money to hold the transaction. And usually if I'm working with a private seller, I'm putting somewhere between $50 to $100 in earnest money. Worst case scenario, if it's an agent deal, I'm putting $500 to $1,000 earnest money. Okay, so this is a way that you can do a flip and not have to come up with more than $5,000. Now there's some pros and cons with this. Let's talk about those. So if you're doing a wholesale type deal, one of the big things is this new buyer has to make money. And you want to make some money, right? So you've got to get a good enough deal that this buyer can make some money. Now the question is, how is this buyer going to make some money? Well, they may do a full fix and flip and they may do a rental. And they're looking for cash flow, especially if this guy is a cash buyer and they're looking to do a cash flow. Typically your landlords are gonna pay a higher amount than your fix and flippers. They're gonna pay a little bit less than that. But the disadvantage of this is you have to get the deal for even better than you would if you were just fix and flipping it or renting it yourself, because you wanna make some margin on this. You wanna make that $10,000. So you've gotta get an even better deal. So that's one of the downsides to this. But some of the plus sides of this is it takes very little money. Okay, because you only had to come up with his earnest money and you had to come up with some marketing costs, or you've got to come up with some time. The other great thing about this is you're only doing half of the deal. All you have to do is find the property. You don't have to fix the property up. You don't have to sell the property. You don't have to rent the property. You don't have to do any of those things. All you got to do is find a good deal that's good enough that you can mark it up a little bit and give it to somebody else. So all you're doing is finding. You're not having to do the rehab or any of those types of things. So that's wholesaling. Now, there's a couple different ways to do wholesaling. It's going to depend on the state. There's an assignment of contract. There's a double close. There's a couple of different ways of doing this, depending upon where you're at and what's the best way for that deal to actually happen. I've got a couple of videos on wholesaling. You can check that out. But that's one of the ways. This is one of the ways that you can do a deal with without having to come up with very little of your own money, certainly less than $5,000. Now, let's talk about another way here. I'm just trying to clean this whiteboard off. Boy, these new markers are really nice. Let's get this board all cleaned off and we can talk about it. So the next way we're going to talk about is if you are doing a some other type of transaction. Let's say you're doing a fix and flip, or if you're even wanting to do a BRRRR deal. So let's start with the BRRRR deal. If you're not familiar with BRRRR, it is buy, renovate, refinance, rent, and refinance. Okay, so let's jump over the whiteboard here. So BRRRR. So you're going to buy the property, right? Then you're going to rehab the property. Then you're going to refinance the property, or excuse me, you're going to rent the property, and then you're going to refinance. Okay, that's what we're doing here. So you're going to say to me, well, man, how can I do this with less than $5,000? Because if you could, that would be amazing. Well, let me show you how. So the key to this, like it is to everything, is you have to find a really good deal. Okay, you got to find a great deal. Find good deal. That's really, and you see this on all these. Finding a good deal is really where this all starts, but this has to be a really good deal, not just a good deal, it's gotta be a really good deal. And here's what it is. Most hard money lenders will lend you 70 to 75% of the ARV, after repaired value. That's what they'll lend to you. So let's just put this in some really simple figures. If it's $100,000 ARV, you could get the property, you could get a loan for $70,000 to $75,000. So that means your rehab, let's say your rehab's 20 grand, and let's say your costs are $10,000. Let's just say they're gonna give you, let's say they're gonna give 75, just to keep our math simple. So your rehab, let's just say is gonna be 20. I'm doing this for example purposes, and let's say your costs, your payments, that type of stuff for the loan is somewhere around $10,000. So you're basically looking at $45,000. So, and it's harder, the lower end properties, it's harder. If it was 200,000, it wouldn't be as stiff of a deal, but you're basically needing to get something somewhere around 45,000 that's gonna be worth about $100,000. That's what you've got to do. Now, here's how this deal works out. You come in and you put the property under contract, you put some earnest money, maybe you put $500 down, okay? No big deal, you've got $500 into the deal. Now, if you can get a loan for $75,000, that's gonna cover your loan costs, your rehab, your purchase, okay? Then what happens is you're using that $20,000 to fix up the property. Once the property's fixed up, it is now worth $100,000. So this is how it works out. You then get permission from your lender to put a tenant in there. You've got to get permission from your hard money lender. You put a tenant in there, and let's say that tenant's gonna pay $1,000 a month. Well, now that $1,000 increases your income by $12,000 a year. Okay, now that adds, so your debt to income ratio, it looks better because you've got to add in, if you're getting this new loan for the $75,000, you've got to add that in, which is really awesome because it helps you get into these types of deals. Then you do what's called a rate and term refinance. Okay, basically your loan that you got from the hard money lender is probably for 5 to 6 months, and it's probably 12 to 18% on the interest rate, could be more, could be less. You then are going to a lender, a traditional lender. This could be a bank, a credit union, whatever the case is. And you're saying, hey, I've got this high interest loan. I've got equity in the property. I would really like to do what's called a rate and term refinance. Term meaning this was 5 to 6 months. Rate meaning this was 12 to 18%. Well, guess what? I want to lower that. And they say, okay, well, we'll go do an appraisal. Well, they're typically going to look at the property and they'll lend 75 to 80%. So that means if this property was worth $100,000, and maybe it's gone up even more than $100,000 because you did such a great job on the rehab, but even if it hasn't, they'll lend $75,000 on the property to $80,000 on the property, which then pays off your hard money lender, and you are into this deal simply for the cost of your earnest money. Your earnest money and the cost that it took you to actually find a good deal. Now, there's some pros and there's some cons to this one. I want to talk about this. So some of the pros are you are getting cash flow, right? You are going to get a cash flow. The difference between what this loan is, once you take out taxes and insurance, and what the tenant is paying you becomes cash flow, and cash flow is king. That's one of the big things that's happening, is you're getting some cash flow. The second thing that you're really getting on this is you're avoiding or delaying some taxes. Now, I'm not a CPA, I'm not an attorney, that type of stuff, but the idea is if you would have flipped this property and made $25,000 on it, you would have had to pay taxes on that. Well, right now you own the property worth $75,000, or you owe $75,000, it's worth $100,000. There's $25,000 of equity, but that's an unrealized gain. You haven't taken that gain yet. So you're delaying that, and you can do 1031 exchanges, those types of things, to make this get delayed even further. So you're only paying on the cash flow that you're getting. So if you're in a higher tax bracket or you're making some good money and you don't want to pay more in taxes, one of these BRRRR deals can work out really well. You have less than $5,000 into the deal if you buy a really, really good deal. Okay. And then you are refinancing and you're getting some rents and you're delaying paying any taxes on that equity until you actually realize those gains. So this is a great way to do this. It's a great way to build cash flow. It's a great way to do deals for less than $5,000. Now, let's talk about a few cons on this. Some of the cons are you have to have good credit. You're not going to need good credit to get the hard money loan. You're going to need good credit so you can get the takeout financing loan. When you want to do that rate and term, you're going to have job history. You're qualifying for a traditional loan, not for the hard money lender side of that. They don't care. They want equity. But when you go for the refinance, you're going to have job history. You're going to have good credit. You can't have judgments, collections, and that type of stuff. But this is kind of the mecca. If you can find a deal that you can make this happen with, you can get into them very little money. this is an amazing strategy for doing deals, especially if you want to grow that rental income. Okay, and avoid some of those taxes, or I shouldn't say avoid, I should say delay those taxes. That's probably the proper thing. So don't get upset with me and put bad things in the comments that I don't know how taxes work, because I kind of do. I wish I didn't. I don't know. Okay, so let's talk about another way here, guys. We're going to talk another way as I clean this beautiful whiteboard off. Let's talk about one more way that we can make some of these deals happen, and that is straight up hard money, okay? Hard money. Just like in the scenario we talked about, if you are buying that property for $100,000, or if the $100,000 is the ARV, after repaired value, okay, and you can get a loan for $75,000, which is 75% of the ARV, okay, if you can get that, you could also fix and flip this property, right? So let's say the same kind of thing, and I'm just using some rough numbers here, but let's say it's $10,000 in loan costs, and it's $20,000 in rehab. It's going to put up $45,000, okay? So if you get this property under contract for $45,000, that's worth $100,000 once you fix it up, and you could do the rehab for $20,000, then you would have a 25% or approximately $25,000 less agent fees. You probably have some agent fees and some title fees, so you're looking at about an $18,000 profit. But the cool thing about this is if you're buying the deal good enough, then you don't have to come up with a lot of money. All you're having to come up with is the earnest money. You're probably going to have to come up with a termite inspection. Those are like $50 to $100. You're probably earnest money. You're anywhere from $50 to $1,000. You may have to do like some type of an inspection, maybe a roof inspection, or maybe a structural engineer. So some type of inspection. Let's just say maybe $500 for something like that. So that's really all you're into this deal, other than the cost of finding a great deal. That's what I need to talk about here, and that's what you've got to get in the habit of doing. Is you have to find a good deal. No, you have to find a great deal, okay? So there's deals that aren't gonna be this good, and you're gonna say, well, how can I make a deal happen if it's not quite this good if I've only got $5,000? Well, I am glad you asked, because one of the things we're gonna talk about next is one of my things called love money, okay? Love money. Is there anybody in your life that loves you? I hope the answer to that question is yes. Actually, I think that answer to that question should be yes for everyone, but we're talking about love money, okay? So what we're doing here is we're saying who loves you, and you can make a list of people that love you. You can think of family, you can think of friends, you can think of people at work, you can think of people at church, you can think of neighbors, you can think of outlaws or in-laws or whatever the case is. Make a list of all these people, right? And who loves you, who trusts you, who loves you, okay? So let's say you go find a deal, it's worth $100,000, okay? But you're ending up buying the property, you can get the hard money loan for like $75,000, okay? But let's say you're gonna be into the deal $85,000. So there's a $10,000 gap here between what the hard money lender can give you and what you need. Okay. Now there's still profit in this deal, right? Not quite as much, but there's still profit in this deal just for example purposes. So the hard money lender can get you 75, you need 85, you're $10,000 short. So what you're going to do is to get that $10,000, you're going to come to your love money. I probably should get like a pink or red or something marker. Love money. Let's put it over here. You're going to come to these people and say, hey, I've got an opportunity for you. I found a great deal. I found it, which is a lot of work. I am going to manage the rehab, fix it up, resell the property, and I'm looking for an investor to help me out. What I'm asking you to do is put up $10,000, which will go into the property. Now, when we sell the property, you will get the first $10,000 back. I won't make anything until you get your $10,000 back, okay? Now, there's two ways to structure this type of deal. You can do this deal as debt, or you can do this deal as equity, okay? So we've got debt, and we've got equity. Let's talk about doing the deal as debt first. If we're doing this deal as a debt deal, what we're basically doing is we're promising this person, we're signing an IOU. I owe you money, right? I owe you this $10,000, and we typically just put an interest rate. Maybe it's 15%, maybe it's 20%, whatever the case is, and you're saying, I owe you this money. Now, if I were in your shoes, I would negotiate and say, I'm not gonna make monthly payments. I will pay you this interest once I pay off the loan, once we actually sell the property. That's that's what I would be doing. I think that's the best way to structure this for you so you don't get into a cash flow crunch. But this one typically has what's called a personal guarantee. I think you should give a personal guarantee to these people. So basically what that means is if you sell the property and they're going to get less than $10,000, let's say this thing all goes bad and they only get $8,000, you're going to owe them the other $2,000 personally, and whatever interest that is, you are going to owe them that money, because you've signed a personal guarantee with this IOU to one of these friends, families, coworkers, whatever the case is. Now, why would someone want to, well, let's talk about equity, and then why would someone want to do this? We'll talk about that next. So equity, let's talk a little bit about equity. Equity is a little bit different. Rather than signing an IOU, you're saying, hey, I'm going to give you a percentage of this deal. Maybe you give them 40% or 30% or whatever. But what's different about this is they're taking on more risk and they're getting potentially more reward. So rather than you signing an IOU, they come in as equity. And equity basically means they now own a percentage of the deal. So let's say they own 30% of the deal and you own 70% of the deal. What happens here is when the property sells, the first person to get paid is your partner, and they would get up to the $10,000. Anything over that $10,000 after cost would get split 30-70. Now 30-70, that's just arbitrary. You could have 10-90, you could have 50-50, you could have 64, you could have whatever. You're basically giving them a percentage of the profits, right? That's what you're doing here. But the difference with equity is if there isn't any profit, they don't get anything. And if it ends up being only $8,000, you don't owe them any additional money. You're not signing an IOU. You're not signing a personal guarantee. You're saying, hey, you're taking on the risk along with me. You believe in this deal. I'm going to give you a percentage of the profits. But if something goes bad, you'll get whatever until you get your money back. But if you don't get your money back, I'm not guaranteeing that because you're taking the risk with me. So that's the difference between equity. Now, why would somebody want to do that? Because they're going to get a higher percentage of the profit. Let's say that it's 30% split, and rather than getting like $1,000 in interest, they could get $3,000 in interest. So they're getting 3 times what it was that they would have gotten if they were doing a debt type of a deal. So it's a risk-reward type scenario. Now, the real question is why would someone want to do this? Why would they want to do this? Well, most of the time it's because they're not getting a great return on their money. They've got it in the bank and they're getting 0.5% or 0.25%, or they don't have a great investment strategy or anything else like that. That's why someone would want to do that. Lots of times they can take advantage of money they just have sitting. So there's a couple of ways to actually find money. So these friends and family that we're talking about, the money could come from a variety of different sources. I want to talk about that real quick so we understand this whole love money concept. This money could come from, they don't necessarily have the cash, it could come from a 401k. It could come from a HELOC, a home equity line of credit against their house. So maybe they can get a second loan against their house. They've got $100,000 worth of equity. They can get $50,000. That even works out better because if they get a home equity line, maybe they're paying a 5% interest and then they're charging you a 15% interest. They're making a 10% spread and they're getting a 10% after they pay the 5% and they didn't have to come up with any cash. Those are some ways that people with love money can come up with it. Another thing that these people with love money can do is they can do what's called credit card finance, okay? So they can get a credit card that allows them to do a cash advance at 0%, or they can use a service called Plastic where they can actually use that. They can draw off $10,000. They can pay 0% interest for a period of time, usually for 6 months to 12 months. And then they pay, they charge you the money or they get a percentage of the profits, depending if it's debt or equity, and then they make some money. So the concept with these things is they can leverage money. So they can use cash, they can use a home equity line of credit, they can use a 401k, they can use credit card financing. Those are some ways that they can actually take advantage of making some money on their money. Now, is there risk? Is there reward? Yes. So what happens if the property sells for less than what you're thinking it will? Well, hopefully it sells for enough where they're still able to make a profit or at least get their money back. But what if they can't do that? What if you can't sell it for that? It depends on if it was set up as debt or equity. If it was set up as equity, they're going to get whatever they get. You're not getting getting anything. They could be losing some money, or they could be getting all their money and you end up with nothing. That's what happens in an equity type situation. In a debt situation, you've said, I promise to pay you. I personally guaranteed that. So if they do get less, then you're responsible for paying them the rest of that money in the future. So that's the difference between debt and equity. I think it's really important if you are working with friends, family members, coworkers, that they understand this. My personal belief is you should tell them the pros and the cons of this. Hey, we can do this as debt or we can do it as equity. Debt, I'm guaranteeing it. Equity, I'm not. With debt, you're gonna make a little less, but still a great return. With equity, you'd have the potential to make more. So I would do it one of those two ways and make sure they understand that, hey, if it goes bad in an equity, I'm not going to be responsible to pay you. But if it goes bad in a debt deal, I am going to be responsible to pay you, okay? Now, the other thing that we really want to talk about here, and we got into a little bit of detail, is the hard money lenders that will finance 100%, okay? Most hard money lenders won't finance your rehab and your purchase at 100% financing. There are some that do. Most say that they offer 100%, but they're not going to give you money on the rehab. So let me explain here. Let's clear off this whiteboard real quick and let's explain so we're on the same page. Here's what a lot of hard money lenders do. A lot of hard money lenders say, we'll lend 100%. What they mean by that is they'll lend 100% of your purchase. So let's say you're buying it for $100,000 and your rehab is $30,000. This is your purchase. This is your rehab. That means if they lend 100%, you have to come up with $30,000 because you've got to come up with this. Plus you have to come up with loan fees. Plus you come up with title fees. Plus you have to make payments on the loan. Okay, that's most hard money. Hey, we'll finance 100%. 100% of what is the question? Well, 100% of your purchase. Now, there are some hard money lenders out there. They are hard to find, but if you can find a hard money lender, this is contingent upon you finding a good deal. There are hard money lenders out there that say, hey, we'll do your purchase, we'll do your rehab, we'll do your payments, and we'll do your title fees. So what is that? The 150, okay? We'll do that. But that number has to be 70 to 75% of what the property is actually worth on an ARV. Okay, that's what they're looking for on something like that. So to get this, you are gonna have to find an even better deal. You can't just find a mediocre deal, you're gonna have to find an even better deal, which is one of the things we've been talking about quite a bit. So let me grab the calculator here so we can look at this. So we got 150 divided by 0.75, that property is gonna have to be worth at least 200K to be at 75%, maybe 215, let's say. So you're buying a property for 100 that's gonna be worth 215. Not every deal is gonna work for this. So if this doesn't work for you, that's where we go to the love money. If that doesn't work for you, that's where we go to the wholesaling. There's multiple ways to be doing these deals with less than $5,000 out of your pocket. It may take some creativity and it may take some time. So these are the ways that you can do a deal with less than $5,000. Now, I wanna show you, I've got a video I put together on why hard money is the backbone of fix and flip funding. We go through why hard money comes before finding a property. A lot of people say, I'm gonna find something, then I'm gonna find the money. No, find the money, then find the property. Why every good deal should start with finding hard money and what to look at. Check out this video for more information. I appreciate you being with us and make it a profitable day. You wanna go watch this video now.